So, Claudia, it's wonderful to be here. I sort of live still in the analog world. I haven't really sort of come quite to the digital world. And I've always thought that data and all these things that we use was in a kind of cloud out there. You know, whoever invented the word the cloud was very clever. But more and more I've made my journeys into NTT data. I've realized actually that it's not in the cloud, it's in a data center. What is a data center?
I think you can think of a data center like a brain. Data is coming in, it then gets processed, some of it gets stored, and then you have output again. We build a data center, a client comes in, they rent space from us, so they bring their servers, we provide the internet, we give them energy to actually power those servers, and we also cool those servers for them. This is how a colocation data center works.
Obviously, a data center uses, by all accounts, quite a lot of energy.
That is true.
And what is that energy used for?
Most of the energy is being used for actually powering the servers, say roughly 70%, and the remaining 30% we are using to actually cool down those servers.
Why do you need to cool them?
Well, the thing is, if you would just run the server, they generate a lot of heat. So if we would not get rid of that heat somehow, eventually the whole infrastructure would melt and then there is no more Netflix or WhatsApp. And we all don't want that.
Because I'm very interested, obviously, in cooling, because walking to the North and South Poles and being in temperatures of minus 65 Celsius, I'm quite used to being cold. But can you take me through the cooling process that you use in the data center?
We need to keep the servers cool. So how we do that is we take that heat from the server rooms, we bring it up to the cooling infrastructure that sits on the roof, and then it's being cooled down, and the cold then moves back into the server room to ensure that everything runs nice and smoothly there.
But what you're saying is that's a big part of your energy consumption, is making sure that things are cool so the system runs. Tell me about water in your process at the data center.
Some of the data centers don't use water for cooling. It's the same principle as if you sweat. So if you're hot, the body actually generates water on your skin. That water evaporates, and by that, you're being cooled down. So we're using the same principle in some of our data centers. We have kind of a waterfall. Hot air is being blown through. That water then evaporates, and by that, we generate cold air again, and we transport that back to the server room. But overall, we are looking at reducing our water consumption. So our new data centers normally don't consume any water. And for some of the existing data centers, we're now going through and looking for optimization methods. For example, we've recently done one project that now saves the equivalent of 14 Olympic swimming pools.
Wow, that's a lot of water. Again, water is a big part of my life, having walked across 90% of the world's ice and 70% of all the world's fresh water. So I'm quite connected to the fact that there's only 30% of the world's fresh water to use here in the real world. If cooling is such a big deal, why aren't all data centers in places like Greenland or Iceland?
Yeah, well, that would come in very handy. That is true from a cooling perspective. But what is important when you use Netflix and so on, you don't want to wait for the movie to buffer, or you don't want to wait 4 hours for your WhatsApp messages to come back. So it's important to build data centers where actually the consumers are. We operate data centers all around the world. And of course, we're looking for the best sustainable solution for each location.
Obviously, there is a huge focus at data centers on energy. Talk me through, Claudia, your use of renewable energy in data centers.
Of course, the first thing is we're trying to reduce energy consumption. Through multiple energy efficiency measures, we're really trying to ensure that we use the smallest amount possible, but there will always be some energy we will need to buy. So we are looking to buy more renewable and low carbon energy. When we look at renewable energy, what we want to do is add more to the market. We are investing into long-term contracts with power plant providers so that they are building new solar plants, new wind farms to ensure that overall the grid gets more renewable.
All of the things you're doing on energy saving, investing in these new facilities, that's giving something back to the world as well. On expedition, got no radio communications, you're in the middle of the Antarctic, you've got to have backups. Talk to me about your backup systems at data centers.
You know, a data center runs 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, so we can't just shut stuff down just because there might be a power outage. So that's why we have generators on site that would then jump into action and ensure that the data center stays on power. And those generators, they use fuel. Traditional fuels like diesel heating oil, but we are now looking into also replacing those with more alternative options, like, for example, hydro-treated vegetable oil.
People are going to want more and more and more data. There's no question about that. So how do you see the future of your industry?
Well, from a sustainability perspective, we continue what we're doing already, but then also integrating new technologies that we will always test and implement to ensure that we will stay as sustainable as possible. I mean, to summarize, best kilowatt hour is the one we actually don't use. And then the second best will be the one that we procure from renewable energy sources.
Well, Claudia, I've made a big exploration into your world. I hope one day I can take you to see my world in the Antarctic and the Arctic. It's beautiful. But I really now have a much greater understanding of my responsibility, that there I am going like this on WhatsApp and using all this technology. And I had no idea the amount of energy that takes. And I'm really proud and impressed by the commitment of NTT Data to be doing all of this in the best way possible.
Well, I think what I'm most proud of is how all the teams within Global Data Centers actually embrace sustainability, let it become part of their day-to-day activities. I think it's fascinating to see how everyone really thinks about what can I do better to be more sustainable for us as a company, but also to give back to society. And there's one example, we have all that heat in the server room and we're cooling it down. Other people outside the data center sometimes actually need heat. So in winter, would be nice if we can just transport that heat into the living room of an apartment. And that's exactly what we're doing. Some of the data centers, we're taking that waste heat, we're taking it out of the data center and we're putting it actually into a district heating network. So that's actually for us a really tangible way to give back to society so that they can use carbon-free heat.
It's just so positive to hear all of this. So I really want to thank you and the team for taking me on a journey into data centers. You've opened my eyes. Thank you.